Today in history, we're going to try and understand how ancient Greek theatres compared to Roman theatre. To start with, we need to look at the timeline of these ancient civilizations and see where they lie. Now, ancient Greece that we looked at last week is here, around about 900 BC. And ancient Rome is about 800 BC. Bear in mind that these civilizations don't happen one after the other. There's often crossovers. They're in different parts of the world, and their civilizations are developing at the same time as each other. So when we looked at Greek theatre, we talked about the Greeks wanting to give an offering to Dionysus, their god, which was incredibly important to them as part of their festivities. Now, Romans were not dissimilar. They loved all forms of entertainment, exactly the same as the Greeks, and their plays were performed during religious ceremonies to honour the gods, exactly the same. But since Rome had over 200 religious days every year, it's quite possible to see a play on almost any day of the year. And some of those playwrights were quite famous. Previously, before the fundamental setup of theatre in Rome, there'd been a plague. And the Romans believed that was because the offerings they were making previous to this were not good enough for the gods. And so they invented the realm of theatre and theatrical games. Now, the actors were professional, but they didn't receive much pay, if any pay at all. So someone had to pay to sponsor that play. And a way for a nobleman to honour the gods would be to sponsor a play that would then be as an offering to them. We looked previously at Greek theatres and we talked about how they'd be carved into hillsides, they'd be made of stone, and they'd have this surround sound made by the sides of the amphitheater. Okay, so semicircular shape with rows of tiered stone seating around it, called amphitheaters. Romans not too different. Early ones were made out of wood, and that's because they were temporary structures. They were erected in marketplaces and towns and were a focal point for people to go to. Their scenery and things for that reason would be limited, and people would still get that benefit of that sound from sitting in the round. So under the empire later on, stone theatres were built as well, and they had room for much larger audiences. Now this theatre is a Roman theatre, it's in Cyprus, and it is still standing today. And you could see that if you were here at the top part of this amphitheatre, it's quite a long way down, very high up, gives you still a clear view of the stage, and the way that it's rounded allows the acoustics and the sound to travel that we looked at last week, and gives you an excellent viewing seat as well. Now, we talked about that all actors were men in Greek times, and bear in mind that we're not going massively forward in history with the Romans and at times at the same time. So again, the actors are always men. Very few female actresses who performed, and if they did, it wasn't a well thought of job, and they wouldn't have been well thought of for doing it. So men would wear women's clothing and present as a female, but obviously still be male. But when did that actually finish? When were women allowed to act on the stage? Well, the Roman Empire fell around 470 AD. And it's going to take another 1,190 years for women to even be allowed on the stage in 1660. And even at that time, it wasn't thought of as the right thing for women to do. So although they could, most women chose not to. And it wasn't the same for men. It wasn't thought of as such a base job for men as it was for women. So to help the audience understand what's going on and the mood the actor was portraying in the play, the actors would hold up happy or sad faces. Well, this is very similar to the gesture and masks of the Greek theatre that we looked at. But there were real reasons for this to happen, because the audience didn't have to behave the way they do in modern theatre. So whether they were watching a play in a small forum or a large open space theatre, the ancient Romans felt free to talk out loud during the play. They would discuss what they liked and they didn't like about the characters. They would compare it to previous plays very loudly. Large audiences make a lot of noise. And if they didn't like the play, then very similar to the Greeks, they might even throw food, sticks, or even stones at the actors. So acting in Rome could be quite dangerous. And remember, it wasn't considered a good job. It was just above begging as an occupation. There were a few exceptions to this, but for the most part, actors were not well paid, and that's still the same as in Rome. But remember that the theatre was central to people's lives. They adored going to the theatre, they loved the drama, they loved the visual aspects of it, And it was bringing everybody together. It was a fundamental part of both Greek life and Roman life.